The engine was still running when they found it. The doors were locked. There were no signs of a struggle, nor of an accident. Inside the car, a few wrappers from snack cakes, unused maps, and a program from the basketball game they'd watched that night. The gas tank was nearly full. The keys were gone. So were the 5 men who had been in it. Outside, only snow and a thick silence that covered everything. They were more than 100 kilometers off their route on a road that led nowhere. No one knew why they took that detour. No one knew why they abandoned the car. But that night, somewhere in the Sierra Nevada mountains, the 5 from Yuba crossed an invisible line, and they never came back. On February 24, 1978, Gary Mathias, 25 years old, Jack Madruga, 30, Jackie Hewitt, 24, Ted Wire, 32, and Bill Sterling, 29, left Yuba, California, heading to Chico, California. The trip was supposed to take 50 minutes each way, with a basketball game between UC Davis and Chico State as their destination. A journey that, to this day, remains unfinished, at least for some of them. They began their trip in Jack Madruga's car, a 1969 Mercury Montego. All signs suggest they enjoyed the game, and later, around 10 p.m., they stopped at a store to grab some snacks. After that, they were expected to return to Yuba, where their families were waiting. But they never made it back. That same day at around 6 p.m., Joseph Shuns was driving to his cabin in the Northern California mountains to check snow conditions before a planned ski trip with his family. On the way, his Volkswagen Beetle got stuck in the snow. While trying to free it, he began experiencing symptoms of a heart attack and stayed inside the car with the engine running to stay warm. 6 hours later, lying in his car and in severe pain, he saw lights behind him. Looking outside, he noticed a car parked further back with a group of people around it, one of whom appeared to be a woman holding a baby. He called out for help, but they went silent and turned off their headlights. Later, he saw more lights, this time flashlights, which also turned off when he called out. Hours later, when Shaun's car ran out of gas and his pain subsided somewhat, he began walking down the mountain, 8 miles downhill, passing by a Mercury Montego until he reached a lodge where the manager helped get him back home. Several days after the boys went missing, their Mercury Montego was found in a remote area of the Plumas National Forest, on the shoulder of a high mountain road, far from Yuba, the same place Shuns had reported seeing it while coming down the mountain. Detectives were unable to determine why the car had been abandoned, especially considering that, with all 5 of them together, they could have easily pushed it free from the thin layer of snow. The vehicle itself was in perfect working condition and had a nearly full tank of gas. Inside the car, investigators found snack wrappers, apparently from the items they had purchased after the basketball game. However, the car keys were missing. One could argue they simply got lost in the woods, but there are several inconsistencies that need to be highlighted. First, as already mentioned, the car was in perfect shape, only slightly stuck in the snow, and could have been freed easily by the group. Moreover, the car was discovered deep in the forest, 70 miles east of Chico, far off the route to Yuba City. Why would they have chosen to head into the forest on a winter night, especially knowing they had a basketball game the next morning, a game they had been excited about for weeks? Some important details need to be emphasized. All 5 of the young men had mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions, none severe enough to completely incapacitate them. Gary had developed a drug addiction during his military service in the 1970s and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He began treatment at a local hospital, and, although he had been a difficult case, by the time of the incident, his doctors considered him one of their success stories. That said, he needed to stay on his medication. Without it, he suffered from psychotic episodes. Hewitt had the most severe disability. He couldn't read or write. Ted Wire helped and looked after him like an older brother. As for the rest of the group, they were simply considered to have below-average intelligence. One witness was a store clerk. Around 10 p.m., right at closing time, he clearly remembered the boys, annoyed that they had come in so close to closing. The mystery deepened when the police towed the vehicle to a garage for inspection and realized that the Montego showed no signs of dents or mud splashes, which was odd, considering the road, only paved decades later, was full of potholes and ruts. Whoever had driven the car up the mountain had done so very carefully or knew the road extremely well, which seemed unlikely. Madruga's parents insisted he had never been to the mountains and also mentioned that he never would have let anyone else drive his car. It was his pride and joy. When Shans was questioned, he also mentioned seeing a red pickup truck park about 20 feet behind him. Initially, this was taken as an important clue, but later Shans told police he wasn't sure about it, since by then he had been nearly delirious from pain. As you can see, there were plenty of mysteries, but very few answers. More witnesses came forward, motivated by a $15 reward, a considerable sum at the time. One woman, a clerk at a store 30 miles from where the car was abandoned, claimed that 4 of the boys had stopped at the store in a red pickup truck 2 days after they went missing. The store owner confirmed her story. The woman said she recognized them by their large eyes and facial expressions. 2 of the men, identified by her as Hewitt and Sterling, were using the outside payphone while the other 2 entered the store. At that point, there were many leads, but none of them brought authorities any closer to finding the boys. Search efforts in the area were severely hindered by a heavy snowstorm that fell that same day. 2 days later, searchers using a snowcat almost got lost themselves, so the search was suspended due to the weather. Months later, on June 4th, with most of the snow melted, a group of motorcyclists out for a Sunday ride came across the trailer at a U.S. Forest Service camp, roughly 19.4 miles east of where the Montego had been found. One window had been broken, insects were swarming out, and when they opened the door, they were hit by the stench of a decomposing body under several blankets. It was later identified as Wire. Search teams returned to the woods, following the road between the trailer and the location where the car had been discovered. The next day, the remains identified as Madruga and Sterling were found on opposite sides of the road, about 11 miles from the abandoned vehicle. One body had been partially eaten by wild animals, but still had a wristwatch and the car keys in his pants pocket. From the other, only scattered bones remained across a 50-foot area. Autopsies concluded that both had died of hypothermia. It was speculated that one may have fallen asleep due to the cold and the other refused to leave his side, ultimately meeting the same fate. 2 days later, during another search effort, Jack Hewitt's father discovered his son's spine beneath a bush 2 miles northeast of the trailer. His shoes and jeans were nearby, helping identify the body. The following day, a sheriff found more remains about 300 feet away. Dental records later confirmed it was Hewitt. His death was also attributed to hypothermia. In an area northwest of the trailer, searchers found 3 blankets and a rusted flashlight on the road. It was unclear how long they had been there. Since Gary Mathias hadn't taken his medication, photos of him were distributed to mental institutions throughout California. Gary was never found. Inside the trailer, Wire's body was wrapped in 8 blankets. The length of his beard suggested he had lived as long as 13 weeks after his last shave. On a table next to the bed were personal items, including his wallet, a gold ring, and a gold necklace. What baffled investigators the most was how Wire ended up in such a condition. No fire had ever been lit in the trailer's fireplace, despite an ample supply of matches, decks of cards, and paperback books on the shelves. It also appeared that Via had not been alone in the trailer. Matthias and possibly Hewitt had been there too. Matthias's tennis shoes were in the trailer, and canned food had been opened with a P-38 military can opener, something Matthias would have known how to use from his time in the army. The day before the disappearance, a Forest Service snowplow had driven along that road to clear snow off the trailer's roof to prevent it from collapsing. Authorities believe the group may have followed the plow's trail, marked by snowbanks pushed to the sides, thinking a shelter couldn't be too far away. Madruga and Sterling likely died of hypothermia halfway to the trailer. Once they found it, one of the three broke a window to get inside. Seeing it locked, they might have assumed it was private property and feared being arrested for theft if they used any of the supplies inside. After Via died, or perhaps before, in an effort to find help for him, it's possible that Gary and Hewitt tried to return to civilization on foot, each taking a different path. But that's just speculation. It still doesn't answer the most haunting questions. Why did they abandon the car? Why did they stray off course and head into the forest? And where is Gary?